Okay, calling to order the South Maui Community Plan Advisory Committee at 5:30 p.m. And can we start with a roll call?
Chair Rob Wiltman. Vice Chair Janelle Kanahele. Tova Callender. Everett Dowling. Lehuanani Huddleston Havoka. Vernon Kalani Kau. Randall Leach. Mike Moran. Cody Nemeth. Wayne Nishiki. Kiyoki Falzer. Jennifer Sullivan. Brian Ward. Here. Let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you. Full house. Vilina mai na lala ke komike o lalo a o kaya ulu no ka papa ho lala na Maui hama. Vilina mai no hoi e ka po o ke ena ho lala ke galana o Maui. Me ka lehu lehu Maui ne. E ho olohe a nana kako i ke kahi ho ike na Daniel Halsey e pili ana i ke ano permaculture. Ho lumu kako i ke kuka ana i na i kamahana no ka ho pono pono ana i ka vai mai uka mai hiki ke kai i ka vai hiki mai ai. So today we will have a presentation by Daniel Halsey of United Designers on permaculture techniques for watershed management. And after that, we'll have public testimony on the topic of watershed management with a limit of 3 minutes each. And welcome to our presenters, United Designers.
If possible, could you make full screen, please?
We start with area picture, GIS information, everything we can plan for climate, soil
Yeah, for the presenter, I apologize. We're having a little technical difficulty on our end, trying to maximize the screen so the audience can see a little bit better.
And the volume.
Much better, thank you.
It's nice that we can kind of see the screen, so we can tell what you're looking at too. Should I continue?
Yes.
Sorry. I need a waving of arms or a thumbs up or something. I'm not quite sure. Go ahead. Okay. All right. So we want to talk a little bit about the source of the sink. And these are a lot of it. We work with our principals and things like that, and how things work. So the source of the water is both ravines and the stream beds to divert the cold water, but we can also pattern the land itself to reduce the amount of runoff in the fields and keep the water in the field. Even though it may have some kind of slope to it, we can create little basins to catch the water so it doesn't move out so quickly. This is the climate map that we have for a concept map for Molokai Ranch. Again, using base map work, using GIS, using the topography, the contour lines, we look for the sweet spots. Where are the obvious, from a satellite view, spaces where we can start to store water? And I mean a lot of water in this case. Large rock dams, and I should say, be specific about that. When I say large, I mean long, I don't mean tall. These dams are usually no more than 5 feet tall and repeating in a stream bed, so they hold a lot of water, but not high pressure and not a high wall, so we do want the water to move along. The next step after something like this is then we tighten the stream beds and do our specific analysis of what and where the best dams are going to go, the diversions and basins. So we do our map in this way, we get our GPS out, and then we get on the land, and we have what's called a stream bed registry. And we register the latitude and longitude of every spot, every stream bed in itself, and we keep a good record of that so we can measure our outcomes and the benefits of doing the work on the land. So this is a typical map of that kind of work in the start. Now in PA, it's kind of interesting to see some of the maps that I found. These two on the right are from 2017 watershed report. And in talking to people too, we're kind of seeing what's going on about town and in that area. And you already probably know a lot of this, but there are different watersheds above the coastline there, and they're separated out by ridges. And there's a lot of different stream beds and there's creeks coming down. One of the issues, of course, is that these lines most likely have nothing to do with political boundaries, city lines, anything like that. Utility, they're never even considered when a property is being divided out or the cities are coming together for incorporation. Although, of course, that was the traditional land management system for villages and families in history for water. So this is the stream bed of the watershed that we're looking at working with, and you can see the affected area as far as my eyes. The small area is being inundated by a much larger catchment, which is the watershed above. So everything at the top ends up down at the bottom and going through the town, because that's the bottom of the hill. In the bottom picture, though, and this is getting to kind of the green solutions, the wetlands within town are great for a last-ditch effort, no pun intended, but those wetlands and those catchment areas need to be up on the hill. They need to be much higher in elevation above the town to have really any effect, other than just filling up with silt and high maintenance to clean out. They are good to have. It's something really good to help catch the water, anything that's in it. But you can imagine the upper landscape and that watershed up there, that's where the work needs to be done. It doesn't need to be as large, it just needs to be more frequent perhaps, and using the natural systems that are already there to keep the water high on the hill, give it a chance to infiltrate, give it a chance to clean itself up, in a sense, not take the cold down with it when it moves. One of our goals is to reduce the energy of the water, and to do that, you need to slow it down and spread it out. And if a lot of the energy can go into the ground, that's better than going across the ground and tearing up the soil. I wanted to show you a couple more examples, just have one here. But you may know some of these things too, but the green belts and cities, many in the United States, all around the world, cities are deciding that they need to have a green belt or an urban zone of no development. And so in this case, Toronto is where basically they're 10 miles wide of a green belt around the town, which is reserved for farming assuming cities and organizational cooperations that maybe do something like that, but the water is coming down and needs to not come down so fast. And that's kind of how we see it here too. Work up high on the gondola where we're working right now. Our base is we're trying to get as high on top of the hill as we can to even get started, because that's where the water is starting to hold it there. And if we can do that, the water will infiltrate underground through the geology and come out and springs down below. But the higher we can work, the less problem we have with erosion, because it's the altitude, or excuse me, the elevation is possible. So this is also some examples of, this is actually key line design, and from P.A. Norman's book, actually written in 1952, about how to hold water on the land. And these are some of the types of systems that we like to use in connection. So even on the street beds, all these cases, all of them across the property, or across the landscape, I should say, are connected. They're a web of storage spaces, not just a street bed and a bunch of dam. The lines actually go across swales, channels, canals, whatever it might be, moving the water back and forth to areas that are drier, areas that need it, from areas that are being inundated. And especially here, the water doesn't always come down in the same spot. It might be somewhere else, but these are spreader channels to the different basins, so the water actually equals out across the landscape, which gives you a lot more storage as the water spreads out and it's used. This is some of the work we're doing in Maui right now, and that's our team in Molokai. We are very specifically using science. We want to be accurate with the work that we're doing. We take very good measurements, and we stick to our plan. We're designing these swales in Molokai specifically so we can keep track of the water that's being held, sediment, ponds, all those types of things, and setting our own standards here. We want to build a replicable system to be used all across Molokai. But the other thing I wanted to say that all the systems that we build are site-specific. So what would happen here, that's going to be different than anywhere else, because there's different soil, different slope, and everything has to be customized for a certain strategy or tactics that are changing. We adjust them depending on the slope and what the needs are in that space. So our goals with this is to see, is the soil is to stand on the mountain. That's what it needs to stay as much as possible. The water to be cleaned of soil before entry to the stream beds and down to the shore. In that sense, also, when it's clean, the water is slow. So those rivers and those streams flow longer after each rain event, and they give the water a longer period of time to infiltrate into the ground. The deer population needs to be managed. I think everybody knows that. That is probably one of the worst problems I see up on the hills. Deer, we sat working on this project in Maui last week, and we watched 130 deer cross the road in front of us in the morning when we were going to our project. And that's just one site. I know there are 200 just on the acreage we're working in Molokai. The deer are a horrible problem, ecological catastrophe on all the islands as far as I can tell, and causing a great amount of damage. Not seen very easily, but the water that's coming down, the mud that's coming down is from the deer. And basically we have to kind of, what's the plan after it was all that agriculture might say, the deer now are the biggest problem for the reefs. So this is the competition that's happening. This, and absolutely positive. It's the deer, once the deer are fenced up on our project here that we're showing, within 5 years we see an entirely different ecosystem there, different plants, and the water is going to come down slowly and clean, and it's going to be a cooler place to be just because of the fencing now. Also talking about the aquifer earlier, replenishing that in stores, as springs were there, very important to us. And then also sustaining the aquifer as a stable resource, just like it was back in the day. It needs to be something that is economically viable, ecologically viable, and spiritually viable. There needs to be a reason to take care of these lands, and we're intermixing tree crops and native crops, and historical crops all across these lands at the same time that we're restoring the watershed. Everybody has to win. The land has to win, and the people who live on the land need to have an income, or at least
Thank you. Thank you. And will you be able to stay on the line for a little while and answer questions? Did you disconnect them? Will you be able to stay on the line for a little while and answer questions? Guess maybe they can't hear that. So, can you hear us?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
really helpful.
Okay. Okay, before we get into a discussion, I'm opening up the public testimony on the topic of watershed management. So, if you have testimony, a limit of 3 minutes, and please approach the standing microphone and state your name and while the topic is given. Thank you.
So I can give you some of the time in the chat. You can read it too.
Do we have a testifier? Yes.
I got a question for the Daniel.
We'll get to that. First, we have public testimony, then we'll get to that.
Aloha. Thank you, Rob. Is this on? Thank you. Thank you, Rob. I think there's a few people who want to testify. We just weren't clear on the process. I hope everyone enjoyed that presentation. It was great. I agree with what I heard, and it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it from the community over and over, and that's one of the reasons that one of my comments was to put a policy to implement the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan. There were permaculturists on that Watershed Advisory Committee and Steering Committee, and they have many of the same ideas that you heard about. Basically, slow the water, settle the sediment, and store the water in the aquifer. That would also benefit our wetlands. If there was more, it would help restore that hydrology. So definitely in support of those kinds of ideas. And my other comment on the watershed plan was that we should have a policy to have a watershed advisory committee from this community to be part of guiding those kind of efforts. Another comment that I made is that I think we need to protect all the gulches with buffers. Those gulches may appear to be short and, not connected, but they are connected underground, and the hydrology is important. When we build too close to those waterways, those natural infrastructures, we put people and buildings in harm's way. So we need to, even if it looks to you like a small gulch or an insignificant gulch, it's probably not. And we can't know everything, but we do know that when you make the water go faster and you let it build up more head, that it's more energy, it's more dangerous. And that's what some of the kinds of development that have been done here do. When you cover over a stream, when you bury a stream, when you try to put it through a narrow culvert, you create these problematic conditions. So that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Any clarifying questions for the testifier? Daniel?
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Robin. Thank you for being here. I wanted to get a definition from you for your comment, natural infrastructure. How do you define natural infrastructure?
It's the natural systems that we have right now. We have a natural drainage infrastructure. It's been somewhat harmed or degraded by development, but we do have that natural infrastructure. And it's also the idea when you say natural infrastructure or nature-based solutions, of working with nature instead of against nature, working with the energy of nature and with what we already have. The other thing about natural infrastructure is it's more resilient. When you have a gulch and you have a buffer, you have a floodplain. When you build there, you have no floodplain, and you're trying to channel that water through an artificial infrastructure, a man-made. So the natural is what we already have and what we can restore. And even when we have to build something, if we mimic that natural system, it's going to be more resilient and safer and better for the environment, and better for our economy and the safety of human beings.
Thank you, Robin.
Other clarifying questions, Cody?
Oh, Robin. So these committees that you're talking about, would they be willing to work alongside Native Hawaiian organizations as well?
Yes, I think Native Hawaiians should be represented on the committees. Not to mention Native Hawaiian philosophy on how these systems work, you know.
Any further clarifying questions for Testifier Robin? Daniel?
Sorry, Robin, I should have asked this when I asked my first question, but in your suggested revisions on the one of the actions, implement the Maui Meadows subdivision drainage master plan utilizing natural infrastructure and nature-based systems to the fullest extent possible. How do you see that happening in Maui Meadows?
Well, I was thinking more about above Maui Meadows, because a lot of the people who live in Maui Meadows perceive that there have been changes in how the water is flowing due to the changes above them with grading and other things. I think Maui Meadows is a great example also of why we need buffers around that natural infrastructure. Those gulches in Maui Meadows could convey the water efficiently, but I personally have seen when the water was restricted by a small culvert under a road, that the water jumped over the road and there was a house down gradient and it hit the roof. It was a cottage, hit the roof of that cottage, and it was flooding everywhere, but that water actually jumped onto the roof of that cottage, which was built just a couple of feet from the gulch. And it is dangerous, and we shouldn't be building that close to natural or man-made waterways.
Great answer. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier.
Hello, my name is David Dawn. I'm with the South Maui Save the Wetlands Hui. I've been living in this area for 20 years and I've experienced many floods firsthand. I'm here today because flooding is getting worse year by year. If you remember, January 27th, we had severe flooding in South Maui that cost the life of a Maui firefighter who was swept into a stormwater drain by uncontrolled floodwaters. This could have been any one of us, and the risk is real every time it rains. The South Maui drainage plan and the drainage infrastructure relies heavily on natural features like gulches, streams, and wetlands, so they must be protected. I support the testimony of Maui Tomorrow and their recommended and amended rules regarding the 100-foot setbacks for riparian stream banks. But this rule must be applied Mauka to Makai to allow streams to flow and to give the water somewhere to go. I'm concerned with your gulch maps on your website from your previous meetings. The gulch map diagrams appear to be derived from the ArcGIS layer Gulches 2023, which only depicts gulches of an arbitrary depth of approximately 6 feet. Your gulch map appears very fragmented because of this. The many gulches in South Maui average only 3 to 6 feet deep. The CPAC gulch diagrams also do not show the Keokea Gulch outlet at the Laie wetland, aka Keokea estuary, which is Central Kihei's main drainage way. So we need better maps, guys. The reason for protecting gulches is to ensure continuous, uninterrupted Mauka to Makai stream flow so that they can conduct stormwater past our neighbourhoods and not into them. All South Maui gulches are drainage ways. And in addition, the gulch maps, you need to look at the stream's DAR aquatic resource layer and the FEMA firm layers that show the flood zones emanating from these streams and where they all join together on the floodplain. We need to create a more complete watershed map showing gulches, streams, wetlands and flood zones. We need to bring together all of the local knowledge, past and present, to create a comprehensive inventory of watershed features and create maps that show the path of the water down the gulches and streams and where they intersect with the urban stormwater systems as well. In any discussion with the watershed, we must include input from historians and cultural practitioners who have the vast knowledge of the kahavai, streams that have long existed in South Maui. Thank you.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions for the testifier? Daniel?
Hello, David. Thank you for being here. Thanks for all you do in South Maui. Have you looked at the maps in the Kihei Drainage Master Plan? Have you seen those maps? And
Yes.
do you think those maps need to be improved?
All the maps are very fragmented and they all deal with separate issues. They don't all come together in one overarching database of all of the resources. So you have some that maybe in the Kihei Drainage Master Plan, 2016, they had the drainage maps which show the streams and the stormwater alternating between culverts across private lands into many areas labelled as wetlands and back into other areas that are receiving basins for all the stormwater. And these are on private lands, and all of the Kihei floodplain at one time was a receiving area for all of the streams that came down the mountain. And this isn't clearly shown on maps. You usually just see the stream ending before it hits the coastline. And what it doesn't show you, and there's been studies on the other islands that show this, is that in bygone days, the whole area was a wetland and a marshy area that received the stormwater. And it's doing it today, it's just not given enough area to soak in. We've hardscaped all the surfaces and we get all these floodwater problems. So yes, we need to update the maps. I've seen all the studies and we referenced the South Maui watershed plan that really needs to be implemented. The Kihei Drainage Master Plan was, long since defunct, and we really need a new update for all the maps and take a serious look at the natural infrastructure that we heavily rely on so we don't accidentally build over it.
Daniel?
You talked about the Maui Tomorrow recommended language. I think it had to do with setbacks.
Yes.
Do you like that language? Because I read your written testimony about setbacks, and you weren't happy what the CPAC did.
My initial testimony sent a few days ago was before I had an opportunity to review the Maui Tomorrow updates and actually was able to give some input on those. So what Maui Tomorrow has given most recently in their testimony is the updated one that I do approve of. It does incorporate, the ideas and the necessary setbacks that are needed. I just wanted to emphasize that, yes, we need setbacks from the gulches, but they need to be Malcolm and Mackay. It's no good if they're just segmented little, sections of gulch. It has to be the stream as it flows.
Any further questions? Wayne?
Is the Piilani Highway the main problem of flooding?
The Piilani Highway is interesting because it's basically a dam wall with only a limited, finite number of passages for the whole watershed to find its way through. So what the Piilani Highway does is it focuses wider areas of watershed down into very narrow constrictions. So we have the three main gulches in the North Kihei. Waikoa Gulch goes to about a 100-foot bridge. Kalanahakoi goes to another 100-foot bridge. And Waipuilani goes to another 100-foot bridge. It seems like a lot. But above that, you have above those three, you have about a 50 square mile catchment area catching rain. And the entire South Maui catchment area receives about 1.4 billion gallons of water every inch of rain. So all this water is coming down. So what Pi'ilani Highway does, it's obviously a necessary evil, but it does tend to constrict all these gulches down. But what we can do is if we do some gulch setbacks and maintenance upstream, a lot less water is going to be focusing down through those choke points. And those choke points get siltified up to the point where they hit the road deck, and we get 12 foot of mud left behind in those gulches. So if we can stop that water coming down, like the gentleman presenter said, by creating kind of dream infrastructure, if we have the proper gulch setbacks with vegetated setback areas, we can prevent a lot of that problem at the choke points. And then we also have an opportunity to deal with the lower watershed, the lower watershed areas where a lot of the flooding occurs by not building any more houses in the major flood zones, and the gulch setbacks will also help to address that as well.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ellerding. I'm a property owner at 36 South Kihei Road, and I'm here tonight to speak about the Waiakoa Gulch drainage culvert. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity you gave me to speak the last time I was here, and this time I did do a little more research. I got the agenda, and I've been trying to educate myself, and appreciate the help we got from Bill Snipes at the planning, or with the Maui Representative's Office. And I also, having served on boards like this, I appreciate your time and your effort you're putting into long-range planning, and I think it's a prudent and wise thing to do, but I also feel that there's a more immediate need that needs to be addressed quickly. And I think that the death of Trey Evans Dumoran was a tragedy that didn't need to happen, and I think a real contributing factor to his death was the lack of maintenance and of the drainage culverts. And I think it's fair to say that the lack of drainage of the maintenance culverts manifests itself in 4 different ways. And the first way is it puts our first providers, the Maui County first providers, at risk. Every time there's a flood, these guys have to come out and put their rights at risk for something that should have been addressed by proper maintenance of the culverts. Second way, we've got a public safety nightmare here. I mean, thank goodness there haven't been any other residents or visitors that have had been damaged or gotten injured as a result of it. I think there's a clear and present danger to the public safety because of the lack of maintenance on these culverts. Third, we've got an environmental catastrophe right around the corner to our reefs and to our shoreline. I can tell you that after the last flood, we couldn't go out in the water for 2 weeks. I mean, it's been 2 weeks, and it's still churning up things, and that pollution is out there that's causing damage to our shoreline. And fourth, and last but not least, it's damage to property damage. Business owners have inventory lost. I mean, ABC store, the Maui market, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost there. And I can tell you, as a property owner here at Kihei Beach, we have, every time there's an event, a flood event like this, it's $1 million. We've got to replace all the lower units, flooring, and all the mitigation that goes on. It's $1 million per pop every time there's a flood. And this is all resulting in the lack of maintenance to those culverts. It's my understanding that Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS 46115, requires that the county take responsibility for maintenance of the drainage ways and remove debris and sources of blockage. That's not happening. Although I will say that just today, we did have Maui County Department of Public Works people out in the Waiakoa Gulch digging for about an hour. And I have a picture of what the results were. I mean, prior to them coming out there, the water was right up to the lip of that Waiakoa Gulch bridge. After they'd been out there for an hour removing muck and debris, it dropped down. It's still 10 inches. I've read some of the reports that say that the water coming down these gulches is running at the speed of the Colorado River. I can tell you,
Excuse
the
me,
Colorado
your 3
River
minutes
is going to...
are up, sir.
Pardon?
Excuse me, your 3 minutes, sir.
Oh, my 3 minutes? Yes. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hang on for just a second in case anyone has any questions for you. Clarifying question. I think it was Vernon first and then Cody.
So just wanted to comment on so going rain, yeah, tomorrow, the weekend. Everybody in clean up now. They're going to have to deal with what's coming around the corner. So
The next 100-year flood event is coming tomorrow.
yeah, so I'm into the 5-year flood. We're not waiting for the 100 because it's just happening and occurring. So the comment I have is, here we are trying to mitigate or trying to figure out, for property loss, human safety. It's kind of like being our lifestyle, living in South Maui, because there's not too much we can do below Pilani Highway, so we got to figure out Mauka, yeah. So, and I know exactly where you're talking about, the Waikoa outlet, and I know Public Works got to go figure that out, because they should not have put that concrete railing up, because I documented that whole project from day one to it ended, and I did not want that barrier up, because the result is the water not going straight to the ocean.
Right.
It's going north and south to those areas that are being impacted.
I agree with everything except that there is something that can be done, and that is to maintain that culvert or the gulch. And after each flood event, it plugs up with debris and mud and sticks, and then it sits there until the Department of Public Works has an opportunity to get around to it. And I don't know that it's become a priority as much as what I feel it should be.
And also I hear like they always they shorthanded. So they
appreciate that.
Yeah,
I do appreciate
they
that.
shorthanded, and then who's in charge of the gulch? Who can clean that up?
Well, according to Maui statutes, it sounds like it's the Maui County Department of Public Works that's responsible for maintaining that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And then Cody.
Aloha.
Aloha.
How long have you been a property owner down there by Waikoa?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Chair, clarifying question.
Mike.
We had one from Kilke.
Right here, one more. Thank you. Aloha, Mike. Thank you for coming and testifying.
Thank you.
Just a couple of comments, and then, so it's good that you followed along with the website. I encourage everybody to do that. If you haven't already, in our actions for this section, there is an action specifically about maintenance, 4.04 to be exact. I don't know when we're going to get to it, but come back and testify, please. Yeah, because these graphs have.
During this meeting.
I'm not sure if we're going to get to actions. We're going to be reviewing policies, but
Right.
keep up with the, because in these graphs we have priorities that are like ongoing, medium, high.
Right.
So if you feel strongly that it should be a high priority when it's designated medium, please.
I will.
Goes for everyone else too.
I'm trying to follow along as best
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can.
Yeah.
But thank you. I
Well,
will
yeah.
come back. Thank you.
And then Daniel.
Hi, Mike. Nice to see you back.
Thank you for having me back.
I just wanted to ask you, when you saw the gulch needed some cleaning, did you put in a request for service? Did you do that?
Bill, I just learned of that. Bill gave me an education on how to do that, and so that's our next step. But absolutely, thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Yes, thank you.
Further clarifying questions for the testifier? Yeah. Thank you. And next testifier.
Aloha. Aloha, Wayne. My name is Joelle Lemaire. I've been a long-distance swimmer all my life. I swim here probably every day for about 12% of my time. That's 2 hours. I have not only swam all over different places, but all over on Maui. There are places that I do not swim anymore. Now, we're going back 30 years, so it has changed. I have a great concern over all the development that goes on before we do any kind of control over where the water will go. And, you know, water is vibe. Vibe is wealth. This is our sustenance of Maui. This is how we live. There are places that are still. I will not go in the water there. There is so much debris. The water actually smells and tastes differently. If you are in the water every day and you swim the same kind of trek almost every day, you see the changes. You see the changes on the reef. You see the fish population different. And this is all this mud, bacteria, enterococci, and Escherichia coli. I have gotten H. pylori twice in the last 5 years. And I know it's got to be from going in the ocean. Of course, I'm always careful. I wait, and I've been waiting a lot longer the last few years to get back into the water after we have a heavy-duty rain. And we're going to have more of them because we have global warming. We have climate change. So how are all of these things going to be mitigated to protect our ocean, our thriving reefs, which we all know gives us that oxygen, that beauty? And if you want to come from a simple economic standpoint, word gets out on the internet that the water is all yucky in Maui, they ain't gonna come and spend $1,000 a night. Simple as that. So what I want to know is, how are these things going to be implemented? It seems like there's an awful lot of construction which just goes on, you know, laissez-faire. And then all of a sudden, here's buildings, but now there is all this mud and deer poop sluicing down into our beautiful ocean. Thank you for your time. I hope something is done about this. And I want to be a part of it. Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Thank you. I have a question from Pioki.
Hello, thank you for coming and testifying. Where are these areas that you don't swim anymore?
I don't go to Haycroft. There's some places down at Keawakapu which have gotten kind of poo-poo. And as far as the other side, you know, I used to go out past Nahiko and all of that.
Yeah.
No.
Do you normally swim closer to shore or further out? Or what kind of changes are you seeing out there? Just turbidity and sediment?
Turbidity, the scent, the taste, and I'm not talking about salinity. I'm talking about some days I go out there and it smells like chemicals, like plastic. Other days it smells like bacteria, you know, like garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that, so this is just a comment, that after these rains that are going to happen, after any of the rains that that make these riverways pour out, everybody go down and look at what's on the beach inside that sediment. Majority of that is deer poop.
Deer poop, trees, branches, garbage, because unfortunately we have houseless living in our gulches, and you know, my heart just goes out to them. It's a terrible situation. So we do need more housing, and I know that is under a lot of scrutiny right now. But we need housing that, you know, we as Maui residents can afford to live in. About 20-something years ago, I was doing tours on the island. And very often we would take the folks from the Grand Wailea or the Fairmont Kealani and hike them out. At that time, we could still do swinging bridges. We would go and lunch them out at the Waihu, at the dunes. And there were a lot of homeless. And they would ask me, what's going on here? Okay, we have some extra food left over. I see Kiki playing. I go, you got a parent around here? So, oh yeah, Tutu here. We go and say, would you like, we have a lot of sandwiches and drinks left over. Thank you so much. You got Tutu babysitting the kids while mom or pop or both are at work, but they don't make enough money to have an apartment or a home. Very sad.
Cody?
Hello. I was wondering, have you noticed difference in springs? And a lot of times when we go in the water, there's springs in certain areas.
It's cold. All of a sudden this cold comes up and we know that that's a spring. And also, because I'm so attuned to water, I mean, I draw differently when I'm in that. You can tell if you're going to be in salt water, you're going to float more. And if you get into fresher water, brackish water, you're going to slightly sink. And I'm very sensitive to that. Yes, there are springs that come up. There's one right at the end by the Manakai. I feel that every day.
And have you noticed, like, with a lot of these changes, have you noticed any difference in the springs? Like, maybe are you not noticing it as much or still the same?
I still notice them. I've also noticed those odors. And that really stresses me out because then I'm trying to swim with my face out of the water. So, yeah.
Any further questions for the testifier? Thank you.
Thank you. Mahalo.
And next testifier.
Aloha, my name is Joy Nelson. I'm a member of the Kihei Canoe Club and a resident of North Kihei. My comments align more with the last two speakers, but more specifically to the Canoe Club. As we all know,
Could you get a
about
little
3
closer
weeks
to the
ago,
microphone, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you get a little closer to the microphone?
Closer?
Talking to it.
Okay. Okay. As we all know, about 3 weeks ago, a storm brought high surf, wind, rain, and it devastated the club, the beach area. Maui County closed the beach down completely and called it a disaster area. In addition to the damage caused by the high surf, dirty brown water, mud, and debris from upcountry flowed down over South Kihei Road and into the canoe site, causing serious damage. A few years ago, the club had the foresight to lease a small area of conservation between the Maui Canoe Club and the Hawaiian Voyaging Society. At present, all of our canoes are located on this land, and the club is allowing some paddling for this site for experienced paddlers, but not for visitors. Access to the ocean is difficult, and canoes have to be carried into the water. The club plans to continue clearing and using this site under the conservation land guidelines for the future. However, now many of our programs, particularly those for young children, teens, and visitors, are suffering. We spoke to a woman this morning that is a visitor, and she was so excited about being able to paddle, but she can't because there's no place to go at the regular canoe club. The Kihei Canoe Club members are asking the county to restore the beach sand now and look into ways that can mitigate the damages of future storms. This problem has happened before and is likely to happen again due to climate change and design problems. Each time it seems to get worse. All the gulches need major remediation. Please stop the Mauka mud and debris runoff into the ocean. The so-called bridge near the ABC store should be made into a real bridge. Please restore the beach so the club can continue to provide the cultural and recreational opportunities for now and the future. It is of huge cultural importance. And she was talking about the debris. From my house, I saw a sofa floating past in the ocean and a filing cabinet. I'm not sure if that came from the erosion from some of the condos near us, or if that actually came through the gulch. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question for you had a question, Vernon?
Comment. So, the Key Canoe Club. So they lost that shoreline in front of ABC store. Yeah. So, and so the other canoe clubs and other water apparatus that sit on the shoreline. You know, even at that, they have to figure out a management issue eventually. Key Canoe Club losing all that sand has nothing to do with climate change. It was human traffic. That every day they go out, the sand always gets pushed back. Yeah, so it was a human erosion. Now they stay down by Sugar Beach, yeah. The pink canoe guys. Now they're not supposed to have the canoes on the sand dune. But I see they get 2 canoes on that sand dune, so it's going to happen again. We're going to lose that sand dune as we have lost that by the pier, by the old Key Canoe Club site. Yeah, the water comes from Malka. We're going to do the best we can. But nature is payback time, kind of, you know, because 50, 60 years ago, this is not supposed to happen. South Maui. You know, the ranch, maybe bad plan to have the ranchers of Malka, but nature is nature's turn, and we don't like what's happening, but nature is going to do what it has to do. But we're going to try the best we can. For the old Key Canoe Club site, they got to relocate. They have to find another place because the canoe's not going to be there.
It's not very hopeful. Yeah. I understand there used to be 200 acres of wetlands around here, and now it's down to 20. I don't know if that's accurate, but I heard that.
Around 22% left for the wetlands or something.
Any further questions for the clarifying questions? Cody?
Could I say something?
No, you have to wait until it's your turn.
Oh, I was going to ask you. Okay.
Hello. So this past Friday, we had some members of the Key Canoe Club come down to our restoration area, and they helped us, you know, basically they came down to just kind of learn from us and see what kind of issues we could help with. Because of, you know, everything that you guys are dealing with down there. And while we were doing that, they're helping us, you know, we did a sidewalk with them and basically gave them our ideas of restoration and coming from a very cultural point of view. And one of the things I was telling them was that because of all these impacts that have been happening over the years, we're kind of reaching this culmination where everything is kind of really being impacted, right? And at this point, the only thing we can really do is move with the Aina. Yeah, I understand that hoiva'a or canoe paddling is a very important tradition in Hawaiian culture, but it was also there was also an extreme balance. You know, they understood what was happening in the ocean, what was happening on the land, right? And they understood how to move with those things. I think the things that we've been lacking recently is understanding what's been happening in the ocean, what's been happening on Malta, and now how everything is being impacted, right? One of the things I was letting them know was that our seed banks are really, really important. When it came down to the site, to your guys' site, I saw very, very little remnants of those seed banks, which meant that there was a lot of traffic that was disturbing those seed banks. And those seed banks are really, really important because they help with the resiliency of those areas, much much more so than any plants that we try to plant in because they've been there for so long, right? And so, I know it's hard to hear, it's very hard to hear, but, you know, kind of what Vernon was saying is true. Like, we're at this point now where we really need to just step back and try to understand what the INA is trying to do to correct itself and move with the INA. I told them the best things they can do is basically to help to restore their seed banks as much as possible and to really mitigate the traffic. And that's the hardest part, when you get all these people in one place moving around, moving the canoes, and everybody's moving this way and that way. Because I remember that area years and years ago, and there was a lot of native plants that were in that area. And sadly, when I went back to look at it, they were all gone. So I can tell that there's been a lot of traffic, and yeah, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to say. But if you talk to some of your leaders in your group, they'll let you know about the trip that they've done to our place.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. Next testifier.
Aloha, Kelly King. I'm testifying for myself and also on behalf of this group from Maui Tomorrow that's been looking at in lieu of having a lot of people involved because we can't get people into this meeting virtually, we've created a working group that's looking at some of the policies. So I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that you've already gotten in the last day or two in paper. And by the way, just speaking, I'm glad that Kyoki, that you clarified that we're on policy issues, because a lot of what you're hearing has to do with implementation and enforcement, and that's the administration's job. So I think you can get through this a lot faster if you kind of separate out, like, when you get to the action items, if people can come ready to comment on what action items are in the plan and what they would like to see differently. I think we'll get through to some solutions faster. But basically, we looked at the amendments that were made at the last meeting, and there were some concerns that some of those may result in worse flooding than we've already been experiencing. And so we kind of went over some of the changes that were made and made some recommendations. I want to speak to the first couple of them because the first one is on 2.4.1, which speaks about wetlands and the definition of wetlands. And it goes back, and this is to me going backwards. If you go back to Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, we're going to be going backwards in time. The reason why the council in the last year passed the Wetland Restoration and Preservation Law is because that definition was too narrowing. And we're seeing a lot of the lands that we know in South Maui should be and could be wetlands. They're dried up or they're not wet some of the time, being developed because they're no longer considered wetlands. And so we wanted to make that, rather than using all three of those conditions, and if you want specifics on that, you can ask Rob. He's the expert on the Army Corps of Engineer water conditions that require to have to call something a wetland. And so we changed it to 2 out of those 3 conditions being met would cause an area to be able to be restored back to the wetland preservation programs that that we're starting to implement to get them back. If you, any of you you all live in Kihei, you all saw the big storm flooding. I went to the kilo that we did in the Laie wetlands about a week and a half ago, and we couldn't go into the wetlands because they're all wet, they're flooded. All that water that would have been down in the ocean with more debris and more dirt was being held in that wetland area, and it was doing its job. And Joy is right that we've gone from over 200 acres of wetlands to less than 25. So that's why we have all this muddy water and this flooding. And so the importance of that, I wanted to mention it last week, but I didn't have time, but I wanted to mention wetlands also in the vein of being important as cultural sites, that they should be considered cultural sites. There's a lot of cultural activity that goes on. And hopefully one of these days you all will be able to make it to one of the kilos. It's a very spiritual and cultural discussion that happens. On the second one, just real quickly, that more specific policies are needed to ensure that development and redevelopment addresses all of the drainage issues, not the issues that are most economically or aesthetically viable. And so when we talk about nature-based solutions, and everyone's been talking about how the natural waterways the water goes. It's not natural anymore because we've done so much development in Kihei. So the water is going in and around developments and through developments, and we've obstructed nature. So, if we're going to get back to that...
3 minutes. Can you wrap up?
Thank you. If we're going to get back to that, then we really have to focus on the biological, ecological drainage that, people like Amanda and Cordy are working on the presenter today. So I'll stop there.
Any clarifying questions for the testifier? Anyone?
Hello, Kevin. So on 2.4.1, is when we discuss this, and I'll ask a question, sure. It seemed that I came to the conclusion that the intent of the policy was to ensure there are adequate buffers, rather than defining what a wetland is. And so, given that is why we did what we did, do you think we just need a policy that defines what a wetland is?
Well, I don't think you need a policy because it's defined in the legislation that we passed last year, the council passed last year. There will be an overlay, so there'll be specific, hopefully in less than a year, there'll be a specific map we can look at that shows us where the wetlands are. And that may be shifting too. There may be other areas opening up that will be considered wetlands. But referring to the county ordinance that was passed, the definition of the county ordinance, which is our definition, which goes beyond and looks at other areas beyond what the Army Corps of Engineers considers a wetland. We've had some areas where we've had huge arguments with that definition, specifically on that property that was proposed for a medical center a few years ago. And the definition that the county has come up with in our ordinance is, it looks at areas that, like that area, like that Dr. Bacha's property, that used to be a wetland, used to be a recognizable wetland. So you don't have to necessarily define it, but I think you need to refer to the county ordinance versus Clean Water Act if you're going to talk about wetlands and what wetlands are.
Okay, so just to be clear, the intent of the policy that the CPAC adopted so far is that where there are wetlands, however wetlands are defined, there should be a buffer that serves all the purposes that is found within in the policy. So that was the intent of that policy.
For that policy, right. But you have to know what is considered a wetland, and you have to know where those buffers are going. And the other thing that the group, our group talked about was that 100 feet is very, very much below the levels that are used elsewhere in the world and in other jurisdictions. So it felt like too small of a buffer maybe. Like maybe it should be 200 feet. So that was another thing that we discussed, that giving that buffer for the wetlands to overflow, for the wetlands to meander, maybe even expand, knowing that that's going to happen more and more as we get more of these storms. Thank you.
Question from Keoki.
Hello, Kevin. Thank you again for coming. This legislation, did it include the redirecting of streams that were diverted in the past? Because I understand that the frustration of what is a wetland. I mean, it cannot be wet if streams that used to feed it don't.
Well, the philosophy behind the policy we were developing with the planning department support is that an area doesn't necessarily have to be wet to be a wetland. I mean, we've gone years of Kailua Pond being dry, for some of you who have lived here a long time, and we never stopped considering it a wetland. So wetlands are going to be wet sometimes, and sometimes they're not. But the two of the three conditions had to do with the vegetative state in those areas. And so if certain vegetation is found, and it doesn't have to necessarily be in abundance, because if there's no water, it's hard to find any vegetation in abundance. But that was one of the conditions. So we weren't necessarily saying what type of waterways, we were saying what type of conditions have to be in certain areas in order to be considered a wetland.
Thank you. Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. Next testifier.
Hi, Doug Ballard, Kihei resident, but I'm also here to comment, not just as a resident, but also on Maui Tomorrow review and comments. On section 2.4.5, it lists certain named gulches. And we support Lucienne Dene's comments that she submitted, I think, to you in writing, that added 7 more named gulches that should really be looked at. And we also support David Dorn's comments about really the need to develop perhaps a better map database of these particular gulches. Also in 2.4.5, it almost seems like there are 2 different things perhaps that are being discussed. One is gulches and the need to protect gulches, and the other is flood inundation areas and the need to protect flood inundation areas, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So we think it might be good to separate flood inundation area protections into a new policy statement, and that's shown in our in the recommended language that we submitted. Also, this topic in particular is a really challenging topic, because a lot of the impacts that we get here in South Maui are coming from outside our planning area. And so one of your policies, I think it was the last one, talks about the need or the support of coordinating with upcountry groups. We think that should be an action item where that can actually go forward and be implemented, because I think that's crucial, and we think that's crucial to managing this extremely important issue. Also, recommending the use of 100-year 24-hour storm engineering standards instead of 50-year storm engineering standards. Seems like 100-year storms are happening more and more and more frequently. You no longer have to wait 100 years for one of these events to happen, and that might be a better standard to design to. And in terms of protecting, getting back to 2.4.5, in terms of protecting the gulches themselves, as was mentioned by David Dorn and some comments here, I think a 100-foot buffer from top of bank would be preferable. And so those are my comments.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions? Daniel?
Hello there. Did you say you're testifying on behalf of Maui tomorrow?
In agreement with their submitted comments.
Okay, so you mentioned Lucienne Dene's testimony about adding a number of additional gulches.
Correct.
Is that included in the Maui tomorrow?
Yes, it is.
2.4.5?
Yes, it is. Yeah, those additional gulches are included.
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier.
I don't want to bring this group down any further, but I'm Larry Stevens, testifying for myself. In fact, I want to raise your sights up the mountain today. I just hadn't had the opportunity to visit the Kula botanical garden today. I don't know if any of you have been up there. It's a beautiful little 8 acres of all kinds of native and non-native plants. Lovely place. They got hit really hard in the storm at the end of 2021. They had to pull 200 dump trucks of dirt out of their 8 acres. Fortunately, they had a retention basin there. They thought it was a koi pond, but they learned otherwise. And if we just focus our attention down here on our wetlands, on the Pi'ilani Highway, on the bottom end of the gulches, we're never going to fix anything. We have got to look up to the top and deal with the deer and deal with all the other devastation that's happening up there. Nothing we do down here is going to touch that. We are still going to get inundated time after time after time until we get control of the deer and until we address all the other issues that are the root cause of what's happening. Whether we build another hotel or not, it's not going to make any difference to the deer. And as long as the deer are in charge, we are going to pay and pay and pay. So thank you.
Any clarifying questions? Thank you. Next is Tamara.
Can I make it? That'll work. Okay. Thank you. Clara Pana. When I read through the material that you created, I did not see the springs and the underground water flow mentioned. I noticed that it was in the presentation tonight, and I was very happy to see that in the presentation they thought it was very important as the part of the system to push the salt water out and to preserve the fresh water that we have here on land. And I wish you would look through your the introduction statements and the statements that you already made, and include the underground water flow as well as springs. You know, springs were so important. One of my kumus said that most heiau have a spring either under it or next to it. And that shows the importance that they held in our culture. And I think it's a logical importance, but at the same time, it is not really regarded that way when you're talking development. Underground water flows and springs that existed before, that should be existing now, the kind of the bloodline of the fresh water system under the earth. I hope that you will look at it again. I'm sorry I couldn't provide you with the language myself, but I think it's fairly easy to add that in. And I just want to say that we ever look at the places where we put all these culverts and culvertized streams and the gulches. I'm not to be a stickler, but I mean, at the Grand Wailea, there are 5 streams that were culvertized on that little 30-acre piece, you know, and then we wonder why we can't seem to get ahead of the toxic poisoning, the toxic levels at the beach. So I think for the planning department, it would be for them to look at the public works department, to look at what has been built already, and to have a real assessment of the drainage system, which I'm sure they're going to do more of, but perhaps you would like to require them to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kyoki has a question?
Sorry, just a real quick comment. Your observation over here. Aloha, Nanti. Thank you for coming and testifying again. So your comment about Lahe'eau being built on or near these type of scenarios with the underground streams. I just want to make a quick comment that in Ma'alaya, there was a large heiau at once upon a time that was built on or near Kapolei Stream, which was a prominent underground stream, and both no longer exist due to human interference. So, mahalo.
Mahalo, Vernon. Thank you for providing that knowledge.
Any other clarifying questions? Cody?
Hello, Auntie. So do you think there is a distinction between gulches, waterways, retention areas in your Manaho? Do you think there's a distinction between those terms?
You know, in the previous testimony, I've heard how it was important only to think about the big gulches and not the tributary ones. And I think that all of it is a system meant to spread the water over the land. So I would say that the size may be different, and that when you're talking about retention areas, I think, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but I believe that the retention area is meant to hold the water, slow it down, spread it out. And for us, I think, traditionally, is to spread it out on the land. You know, I recently saw something that I thought was really cool up in McKenna, and that was like 2 stone walls that were maybe about 6 feet apart and coming down, and they didn't look like they were a house lot or something like that. And I asked what it was, and he said that was to channel the water so that the water would be spread out over this area. And so I believe that when you're talking about protecting the gulches, putting a retention area into it that is not natural, where I've seen where they've blasted retention areas into gulches, I don't think that serves exactly the same purpose. And I may be wrong, but the thought of what was presented tonight and what Robin Knox talked about is the slowing down, the spreading out, the holding it on the land. So
Any further clarifying questions? Thank you. And next testifier. Okay, looks like we are done with public testimony for today. And we will take a 10-minute break and continue. Oh, sorry. Okay, so closing testimony at 7:09 p.m. Okay, so we have on the agenda to work on the actions of the management, but initiative came up with 2.1 on the policy and so I'd like to hear if there's anyone who would like to make a motion to reopen the 2.1 policy.
This one you guys did change because of the recent wetlands bill, just as a reminder.
I'm sorry, that's my mistake. It's 2.4.5, right?
Okay. Yeah, get hard.
What the number again?
2.4.5.
On that one, I would not recommend naming all the gulches. It actually weakens the policy to have everything named. For one thing, if there's a spelling error, then maybe we're going to name a gulch that doesn't exist.
First, we need to decide if we're going to reopen it, though. Someone needs to make a motion. Can't be me.
I motion that we reopen 2.4.5.
Is there a second? Second by Kyoki. Okay, Tova, you're the one who's put the most work into this by far. Could you tell us what your thinking is right now about 2.4.5?
It might not be perfect, but with the help of the planning department, I have a proposed different set of language that divides out where redevelopment would happen and new development would happen. And it allows for a separation. We're restoring the part where we talked about the 100 feet from the top of bank, because that was the intent, was those protections would be in place and not diluted by being just down in the inundation zone, lower down. So the part B of that includes that section. And in addition, based on the DAR streams layer map, some additional named drainages have been added. So I would like to motion for adoption of that modified language.
If you are going to name the streams, I would, instead of especially, I would put including but not limited to.
Including but not limited to. Yes, so before it starts with Ma'alaya added in blue, including but not limited to. But I would need a second.
Who seconded by Kyoki? Kyoki seconded? Okay, does everybody have the text in front of them so we can talk about this? So, Cody?
Sorry, I can't find it right now, but is this address the 100-foot buffer as well that we're talking about? Is that language change in the end?
Why don't you just read the whole thing, Tova, so we know what we're talking about.
For redevelopment, gulches and drainage ways, as identified in the map in figure 3.5, page 106 of the plan, must remain an open space and no new permanent structures may be developed in or within 100 feet of the top of the bank of identified gulches and drainage ways unless low-impact development strategies are implemented to prevent stormwater runoff, especially Ma'alaya, Kanaio, Pohakea, Waikapu, Waiakoa, Kalanihakoe, Waipuilani, Waima, Hai, Lili o Holo, Kiavakapu, Wailea, Kamaole, and Kapunakea.
And you recently just amended the including but not limited to, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Instead of especially included but not limited to, very good point. And then there's a second part to all of this. Have you since found it? Which is for new developments. It removes the exception for LID and has an exception for public bridge crossings and utilities.
So that effectively removes the concern that by having public roads, you could have the whole area filled, the whole open space could be filled in with a road otherwise, which I don't think was the intent of what we talked about. We talked about really protecting those spaces as a buffer, but acknowledged crossings might be necessary to enable things like the north-south collector or other future escape routes out of South Maui.
So just FYI, I've been trying to figure this out and talking a lot to Michael Reyes, who spent a lot of time working on the wetlands ordinance, which also affects this because it talks about a 50-foot buffer. And my first reading of the definition by the Army Corps of Engineers is that it has to do with wetlands, but the definition actually is different for wetlands and for streams. So there are different ways to identify them. So the way it works is that any gulch or stream, anything that can lead water, which can be shown to be linked and eventually lead to the ocean, is covered and is protected. And by the wetlands ordinance, it's protected with at least a 50-foot buffer, and in some cases 200-foot, depending on what's going to be deployed near it. What was I going to say? Oh, and the other thing which is important to know is that who decides where these gulches are, which are the gulches. So the county has commissioned H.T. Harvey to investigate that, to do a survey. And they're expected to produce this late fall, maybe October. And that will be the draft, at least, of what streams are considered connected in some way, and so protected by the wetlands ordinance. Now, some people might say, if there already is protection, why are we adopting additional language here? But I think there is a good reason, and that is that we're asking for additional protection, 100-foot protection of known streams, which go all the way from Maui to Makai. These are the ones which are known to be connected and pose a direct threat to South Maui in terms of flooding. So this is not in contradiction to or instead of the wetlands ordinance. This is additional protection. That's how I see it.
So would that mean it's 150 foot then, if you said one is 50 and then adding the additional 100? Is that what?
No, it would mean that any gulch which is found to be connected one way or another would have 50-foot buffer. But these particular ones which are listed would have a 100-foot buffer. If we adopt this language.
And then Tova's just for the second part of also including but not limited to, same as the first recommendation. So just recommend that.
Further discussion, questions? Does everyone have the, okay, good, it's on the screen, okay. Good. So I think this is a good solution in that it doesn't conflict with the good work that has been done to compose the wetlands ordinance and map it. Vernon?
Hey, Chair. So reading the Maui tomorrow comments. Just want to make sure I'm reading this right. It's kind of tied into what Tova is presenting or suggesting. .4.5. It's the thicker packet. Look like you guys never find them yet. No, so I just reading the other testimonies. The way I translating it, it's just want to make sure that, I mean, it looks pretty much what you're sharing. Yeah? If anybody want to check that box, just in case.
I think it's actually this language is a little bit stronger because it makes fewer exceptions and goes from 50 to 100.
Okay.
Who?
I have a question. So Tova, in regards to what Karen from the planning department had responded back to you, could you tell me, and I'm sorry if you're repeating this, so they had recommended for the new development subdivisions paragraph, they had used with the exception of public roadways, and you had said with the exception of public bridge crossings. Could you explain to me what the difference is?
Sure thing. So when we first passed this a couple of weeks ago, in my mind, we were creating a buffer along those gulches. For all the reasons we've talked about, it's really important. And I realized the way the language was written with the exception of roads, those roads in my mind just connected me and Kyoki. It wasn't running along the edge of the gulch. And so the reason I wanted to change the language to make the exception of bridges was to eliminate the possibility that instead of using those as open corridor buffers that are important, they became just places to put the roads. So it's tightening up the language so there are true buffer protections, but not eliminating the need for us to be able to connect north to south, as we've heard again and again.
And then, if I may please, so maybe I can ask Karen this. So, but you folks, you agree with that? Public roadways, bridge is fine. And then it's a drivable bridge, right? I just had to ask. Okay, thank you.
So to Vernon's question, there's a difference. I mean, there's a difference between what Maui Tomorrow is proposing and the language we have up on the screen there. And I should add too that I did ask Karen if it's possible to add the resolved additional gulches that Lucienne identified to the map and to the actually I take that back. Sorry, that was a different question. Jennifer.
I have a question too. So some of these gulches, or at least one, is in a residential area. So for redevelopment, if a home gets washed away, or part of a home, are they not allowed to rebuild their home? And do we need to put something to address that? Do you see where I'm going with this buffer and being so strict with your language? Or am I missing a point here? Is there a policy that covers this?
That's why it's separated out for redevelopment, so you can have the low impact development strategies. A home would be being redeveloped.
Okay, so it's okay.
Everett?
Just continuing on that line of thought, you're in Maui Meadows. A house burns down. Doesn't have to be a flood, it burns down. And can you redevelop it? I think this is excessive. I think this is extremely excessive.
Cody?
In my thoughts, I'm thinking if you're living in an area and the water washes your house away, then wouldn't it have the potential of doing that again?
Good point. So there you go. You have to maintain the gulch, right? So what are we doing with the gulches as well? Like it's another issue. Like Vernon was saying, you got to go north. You got to look at where the source is coming from. I think. Just a thought.
Vernon, yes. John Davis.
Okay, wait, so the house there next to the gulch, right? The water come down, the house get washed away, and then the question is, can the homeowner redevelop in that same place?
Right. Can they rebuild the home? The question to
Yeah, just like Tornado Alley. The house gone, they build again. The house gone, build again. For me, I gotta relocate or something, knowing that it's going to rain this weekend, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's I wouldn't build back again, knowing what would happen. I mean, that's just me. Yeah.
Brian?
Might as well go down the table.
So I think, Everett, you bring up a really good comment, because we're talking about, I think there is some logic if it's a flood from water, that seems a little silly. But to your point, that if it's a different cause of something coming down, so I think we need to be careful that we're looking at all aspects, and it's not just the flood took it away, that if for some reason trees fell on the house, are we going to say you can't rebuild because it didn't get destroyed potentially due to a flood?
Hurricane.
Right, hurricane. So I think it's interesting. I didn't think from that angle, but I think that that's something we do need to take into account so that we're not boxing things into to such a degree. I don't know how to fix that, but good point.
So it does say no new permanent structures be developed. No.
I just had a clarifying question for planning. In the event of some of these disaster scenarios, we've talked in the past how exceptions are granted. Would those be the kind of thing where this isn't actually, I mean, the intention of this is not to stop people from responding to an emergency that's happened to them. The purpose of this is to not continue to create a situation where we have $1 million flood happening every time Waiakoa happens in one thing. I mean, we don't want that. So would this be one of those cases where an exception could be sought, and so it's okay to hold it for the purpose, but know that we're not hurting anyone in the long run who needs to respond to an emergency?
That's the reason that redevelopment was separated out, because it's not prohibiting development. It's just saying you can't use standard development practices in those areas. You're redeveloping in a waterway. You should probably be using low impact development standards anyway. This isn't saying if your house catches on fire, you can't develop. That's the reason for separating the policies, so that you can say new development, we're going to be stricter. Older development, it's already there. They do have some development rights.
You had a comment? Question, Cody? Yeah. Okay. So how are we doing with? I haven't heard any proposals for changes in the text on the screen, and we have a motion. And see, we have a second? Yes, we have a second. Okay. Are we ready to go to a decision? Any objections to the text? Everett objects? Okay, so we'll take a vote. Those in favor of the revised 2.4.5 proposed by Tova and on the screen, please raise your hand. In favor. Sorry. I guess Karen's taking it.
I mean, if I don't vote, then it's going to be a yes. So half. I don't know either.
You got him, Karen? And those voting against?
Then we can come.
Is Leikua, Jennifer, Brian, and
And those abstaining? Okay. So I find that the motion has passed. So do we need to do anything more with the policies, or can we go on to the actions now? Is there any issues? Okay. Okay, first 4.01 action is implement the Maui Meadows subdivision drainage master plan. So I'm sure Daniel has a lot to say about this because he's been very much involved, but I read it, I browsed it, I didn't read it thoroughly, and it has small kind improvements which are great, like roadside swales, modifications to driveways, regular debris cleanup, but also has a major plan for what to do seriously about the water. And it provides 3 options. And option 1 is to redirect the water south of Maui Meadows. And it says that we don't have any information about what is south of Maui Meadows. In other words, on the other side of the highway. So that would need to be investigated. The second one is, second option number 2, is to build out the culverts so that they can carry enough water for a 100-year flood. And then option number 3 is to build out all the culverts in case that's too expensive, so they can handle a 50-year flood. So those are basically the 3 major options in that drainage master plan. And I happen to know, because I've heard from people in Maui Meadows, that there is a study commissioned to come up with Amanda Gording's company, Eco Solutions, to come up with an alternative, because that's not very popular, to just dump all the water south of Makai of Pi'ilani Highway, or to just build all these additional culverts. So I'm kind of skeptical to that plan at this point. And then also the cost, just so you know, the cost, according to the plan for option 1, the diversion is $34 million. The cost for option 2 is $12.5 million. And the cost for option 3 is $11.3 million. This is according to the plan. So in many ways, it's similar to the Kihei Drainage Master Plan in the way it's thinking. Daniel?
So really, it is a companion to the Kihei Drainage Master Plan. That's why it looks so similar. The 3 recommendations is what Rob stated. We had a presentation by Eco Solutions at the Maui Meadows Neighborhood Association annual meeting, and most of their solutions are Mauka of Maui Meadows, not within the subdivision, and they're great. I mean, they're pretty similar to what we heard from Daniel Halsey. Very, very similar. So as far as implementing the Maui Meadows Subdivision Drainage Master Plan, there is those 3 recommendations. I think the one that will be least liked, well, I can't say that, but speaking for myself, I don't think diverting the water above Maui Meadows and shunting it somewhere else and open land is the key, because there's a value to having water going down its natural course. There's a value to that because it'll help recharge the aquifer. Of course, below Pi'ilani Highway, the natural course of the waterway has been changed for Wailea Resort. And doesn't follow necessarily the natural waterway. But I think some of the implementation recommendations will be useful for us in the short term. Meaning, we have undersized culverts, and so increasing the size of the culverts would be beneficial to Maui Meadows. But I think looking at the big picture, we have to look Mauka of Maui Meadows for real solutions to holding the water on the land, giving it enough time to percolate and to drop sediment, and then follow its course into the ocean much cleaner. Because a lot of the stormwater that comes into Maui Meadows is already filled with debris. When it comes into Maui Meadows, it's filled with sediment and it's filled with, all kinds of stuff. And I think the majority of, it comes Mauka. Not from Maui Meadows, because most of the drainage ways in Maui Meadows are already scoured down to the Blue Rock. And as long as you take care of the gulch as a landowner and not throw any debris into the gulch, which goes into the ocean. I think a lot more people are doing that now, so I would support 4.01.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Thank you, that was informative. But why not support the entire plan, the entire drainage plan? If you're, why only focus on that plan and not the entire one?
Because Maui Meadows has their own subdivision drainage plan, just for that subdivision. Yeah, separate from the Kihei master plan.
But everything that's happening, like you were saying, it affects everything. It's all connected. So I'm just putting it out there. Any other thoughts of implementing the whole plan versus just the Maui Meadows?
Kyoki.
Daniel, since you're from Paiahu area, I just want to know what kind of changes upland. Do you have anything specific that affected that Maui Meadows area? Has, for instance, like, I'm not calling it out specifically, but like Waiahuli, has that affected that area, the Hawaiian Homes development area? None of that? No.
Yeah, that's in a different
correct
watershed drainage way.
So you're affected more towards Kiokia and Ulupalakua, or?
Yeah, more towards Ulupalakua Ranch. Yeah, we're right. Ulupalakua Ranch is directly
right above Mauka, yeah?
Mauka of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, for example, we're definitely affected by what's happening with the deer up there, down where we are in Maui Meadows. No, I would support a holistic approach. I'm just thinking, well, we don't have any control over that land above us. It's not in our purview. It's not part of it's not in the South Maui planning region. So.
Brian?
So I would agree with Jennifer in the aspect of why would we not want to implement the entire master plan, because if you look at 4.02, it's saying update, but it's not actually saying implement. So it seems like we're implementing a portion, but the other piece is just updating it, but not necessarily taking action on it. And then I guess I have a question for the long-range department, which is to your point, Daniel, of we're requesting things above from the ranches that we don't have really control over. So how would you propose that we develop actions that we can hold them to that will actually be something that actually benefits us? Because we could say we want all that as much as we want, but if they choose not to do it, then we're kind of stuck.
You guys are talking about 4.01 right now. The part of the reason for the separation is that Maui Meadows subdivision has its own drainage master plan that's separate from the Kihei drainage master plan. So you could add update and implement the Kihei drainage master plan when you get to 4.02.
Wayne?
Mr. Chairman, right next door is 670 that's coming up. Why do we have to absorb drainage from Maui Meadows and 670? Is there a plan that directs all the drainage from 670 and Maui Meadows without having to South Maui to absorb it? I don't want to sound selfish, but I'm just thinking about the community. What do we have to do? Inherit all this water that's coming into South Maui, Daniel. I don't want to have to take on somebody else's rubbish.
Everett?
Wayne, the water running through Maui Meadows from Malka, it's allowed to pass through. Maui Meadows can't contribute to it. 670, the water running across 670 right now, when they develop, they can't contribute to any additional runoff. I think in the 670 case, they're actually reducing the amount of runoff. So there will be less runoff post-development than is occurring right now. In other words, they're building retention basins on that property to accommodate not just what their development will generate, but they're also reducing by retaining water that's currently passing through. So it won't be contributing any more runoff. The Maui Meadows case, there's no areas within Maui Meadows to build those basins. They would have to occur Malka of Maui Meadows in order to reduce the runoff that ends up in the ocean.
Mike?
I don't want to finish up. I want to finish up. Anyway, we have no idea what the hell global warming is going to bring down from the mountains. And I shouldn't want to pile South Maui with all the drainage problems that this mountain is going to create when the cornerstone hits. I think it's kind of selfish. Why we gotta absorb all this punishment when it's not the drainage that's coming down the mountain?
Well, I agree with your point, Wayne. We have no control over that, and we need to focus on the South Maui Community Plan.
Okay, Mike?
Daniel, because you were leaning toward supporting it, what did you look at Robert Knox's additional language, which would kind of modify that? And if you did, are you agreeable to that?
Yeah, I asked her about that. And really, she was referring to things that could be done above Maui Meadows, not within Maui Meadows. So I asked to her to clarify where she saw natural infrastructure and natural-based systems. Did she see it in Maui? Could you see it within Maui? No, it was above Maui Meadows, where they have, where those things can be done and should be done if we want to manage stormwater so when it runs downhill, it slows down, drops its sediment, and it enters the ocean clean. And with what we have with the implementation of this plan, it's not going to do that. It's not going to reduce sediment. It's just going to manage stormwater flow through Maui Meadows, mitigate it, so we don't have as much damage to property when we have these big storms like we've had the last couple of years. So yeah, it's not water quality, it's more controlling the flow, directing the flow of stormwater out of Maui Meadows.
Okay, if I can just clarify or just understand. So when she says utilizing natural infrastructure and natural-based systems to the fullest extent possible, your understanding is she's not talking about doing that in Maui Meadows, she's talking about doing that above Maui Meadows, which is maybe beyond our South Maui Community Plan.
Yeah, that was her words when she answered my question.
Mahalo.
Tora?
Daniel, the Kihei Master Drainage Plan is having the Eco Solutions component appended to it, and so it will be the same thing. Is that going to be the case for the Maui Meadows Drainage Plan, or because it was paid for privately, will it not have that same relationship? I'm just wondering if that's something that is going to be appended, if we can just mention that explicitly, because I think the whole point of this action is people in Maui Meadows want something to be done about the flooding. So if it's going to be appended, or if we need to call it out as a part of this, could we edit the language?
No, it's not going to be appended to my knowledge. So it'd have to be added, maybe in the next policy.
So I think we've talked so many times about how we can't solve these problems without looking Mauka. Now we're still saying we're not going to look Mauka. We're not going to do that because we're South Maui. I think that's wrong. I think we have to look at solutions which really solve the problem. And the county makes decisions, they assign money which affects the whole county. They don't say, we're not going to do anything for Maui Meadows because that water comes from above. That'd be ridiculous. I think we have to do the right thing here. And $12 million for more concrete, that would go a long way towards buying land above Maui Meadows. I don't think that the cost of buying the land should be an obstacle there. And I doubt very much that the rancher would say, no, we won't sell you this land to stop the water from flowing right into Maui Meadows and into the ocean. I don't know, that's my opinion. I think Vernon was next, or?
That's all those bells and whistles went off, because I mean, feel like we are on stranglehold, because most of our conversation for the last 3 Wednesdays has been Mauka, and yet it's not our district. So me, as on Kanaka, it's I get a hard time connect because there's a disconnect with Mauka. So I don't know if I should raise my hand or keep them down. It's still gonna be on yes. So I stuck. It's challenging because things not lining up holistically. We implement that. We gotta start with the guys upside. Maybe they don't like talk with us because we never ask them yet. It's just challenging.
Okay, Lihu is next.
I want to refer back to Robin Knox's comment and about implementing or recommending utilizing natural infrastructure and nature-based systems to the fullest extent possible. I mean, she put it in here, so I think this is from her. I would like to recommend that we use that because she's also suggested that in other areas, and I don't see how it could hurt, and she used the words fullest extent possible. So if can, if no can, no can. But I think it would be good to try to utilize some of these, recommendations. So I just wanted to go back to the conversation about Robin Knox. She may have spoken to or spoken with you, Daniel, but I'm just going off of what she had specifically submitted as part of her testimony. So I would like to recommend that we use that as well, because I don't see how it could hurt. It could only complement, but that's just my recommendation.
And then one more thing about this, restricting ourselves to only thinking in terms of the South Maui district. What we're expressing here is what we want, right? We're not necessarily going to get it, but I have a hard time seeing that other districts are going to say, no, we want all the water to flow down and be unobstructed and flow right through Maui Meadows. I mean, why would they want that? Why would they not want to make use of the water upstream to improve the land and plant and make things better for themselves, be able to grow things more? So what we're saying here is not necessarily, we are going to do this. We're saying this is what we want. So is this what we want? Or do we want to just build more cement and pass the water on to the ocean? That's the question.
Refer to what I had suggested though, because we're talking about same thing but two different, so I'm a little bit confused now. We were on implementing this, so I just don't want us to forget. Sorry. Is there a question? Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, I like what you're saying, but I think we're not sticking to 4.01, if that's what we're working on. So I want to make a motion to add the verbiage that I had just stated, and I could repeat it, that Robin Knox had recommended. So should I repeat it again?
Yep, we don't have a motion, so this will be the motion.
Okay, I thought Daniel made a motion, so, okay, so I'll make a motion then. Okay, so should I repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I make a motion to add the verbiage as presented by Robin Knox, and I'll read it in its entirety. So 4.01, implementing the Maui Meadows Subdivision Drainage Master Plan, utilizing natural infrastructure and nature-based systems to the fullest extent possible.
I second it.
Seconded by Jennifer. Further discussion?
Chair.
Kyoki?
I'd like to know some of the member input regarding Karen's suggestion about to add update and implement at the beginning. You guys, possible friendly amendment? Can I? Yeah, that's it.
So Karen asked put the word update and implement the Maui Meadows. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I thought that was a good idea, but I just wanted to not be about me.
I thought that was for 2.
And for number 2, we're going to do
No, but it was a
implement and update.
suggestion kind of coming off of that a little bit.
So I think if I understood, Karen was saying 4.02 is where we do the update and implement.
Okay, I misunderstood.
But
I thought it was quite pertinent.
If that's a friendly amendment, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I would accept it.
I accept.
Okay,
Yeah.
friendly amendment?
Yep.
Mahalo.
So 4.01, update and implement. Further discussion? Are we ready for a decision? Any objections to the updated text? I find we have adopted 4.01 with the amendments. 4.02, update the Kihei Drainage Master Plan for flood protection and coastal water quality protection and sensitive ecosystems management in South Maui. And update the plan with the findings presented in the ecological alternatives analysis prepared by EcoSolutions LLC 2020, take into account the impacts that upland development have downstream, prioritize green infrastructure and low impact development where feasible. So I had suggested that we also include, and Robin does this all the time as well, the recommendations of the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan, because they do go Mauka, and they do look at a more holistic solution to solving the stormwater runoff problems in Kihei. And here again, Robin suggests adding natural infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So of course I have severe concerns about the Kihei Drainage Master Plan. And when it was presented in, I think it was 2017, everyone who saw that said, this is terrible, what is this going to do to the ocean? And the response was, that's not our problem. This is about stormwater, it's not about protecting the ocean. It was about building a superhighway to carry the stormwater as quickly as possible into the ocean without thinking about the consequences, which are terrible. I mean, like the testifier Joel said, if we lose our reefs, if we lose our ocean water quality, who's going to want to come here and swim? So I had initially suggested update and implement, but then I removed that because I had such concerns about the Kihei Drainage Master Plan. It does not look Mauka. It has almost all concrete. It adds a number of drainage basins, but almost all of them are right at Pilani Highway. 2 of them are just at the north border of the MRTP, and 3 of them at the north border of the Obukai Light Industrial Center. But none of them, as Jordan said, that's not enough to catch the water, at least not for Kulani Hakoi. We have to go Mauka. There's no other way to do it. So the Kihei Drainage Master Plan provides a lot of information about the flows and locations, and it has some good ideas. I think those basins should be built, but it doesn't solve the problem. Discussion. Oh, Tova.
I agree with what you're saying. We don't want the plan as written. But as I read 4.0.2, it's saying update it for not only flood prevention, which is all it does now, but coastal water quality protection and sensitive ecosystem management. Append eco solutions, implement the Southwest Watershed Management Plan, which actually does point to a bunch of stuff from the Master Drainage Plan, and add as many nature-based solutions. I guess the way I'm reading it is, this isn't a request to implement as written, it's a request to update, to reflect what's been voiced, and then hopefully do something about it.
That was my reading too. I'm just worried about committing to as it's written. Kyoki?
Oh no, yeah, I was actually gonna bring that up. That just the simple word update, can't that kind of cover a lot of the concerns? So I'm just kind of concurring what you're saying, and I like the addition of Robin's suggestion, and also we can probably do the little update and implement in the beginning too on this one as well. So just thoughts, everyone else, how do you guys feel?
Kyoki, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to update and implement, and then to insert Robin's suggestion as, you have the copy, yeah, Karen? Yeah.
I second.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cody?
Can I add a friendly amendment to add consult with Native Hawaiian organizations? And linear descendants to areas, because they may have a lot of information, generational knowledge, history of areas, and a lot of Native Hawaiian organization groups that are doing restoration efforts are constantly in that Maukutsumakai progression mode. And so I think they would be valuable to contact.
The what?
Yeah.
Is it
Friendly
remote,
amendment.
is it remotely possible to make like a sweeping motion to say, consulting with Native Hawaiian organizations or whomever for like everything?
So that's where the policies come in.
Okay.
And you do have a policy that
That
basically
can say
says that, yeah.
Okay, so there would be an emphasis.
So we'll make sure it says that, but yeah, that's where, they have to consult the policies when they do this.
Okay, thank you.
I would strongly urge that we include the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan, because that is the best science and the most knowledge we have about how to address this problem. There's nothing else that comes close. That was also in Robin's recommendations. Kyoki.
Do you need me to motion to add that, or someone else has to?
Someone else has to do it, sorry.
Okay, friendly amendment, anybody? Rob's recommendation.
Do you accept the suggestion from Cody?
Yes.
And Tova?
Can I make a friendly amendment to add in the Southwest Maui Watershed Management Plan? And another friendly amendment?
Yes, thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. I'll
It's
answer.
getting very friendly over here today.
Okay.
So after flood prevention, instead of the word and, instead say to reflect or to, in order to address, something to make it very clear. We're not just saying Kihei Master Drainage Plan, we're saying Kihei Master Drainage Plan adjusted for those things. To address.
Yes, thank you for that suggestion. Totally.
There was something else you said, and I did not catch it.
The Southwest Maui Watershed.
Where did you want that, after Eco Solutions? Or
Yes,
update
yes,
anything?
after 2020. And the recommendations of the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan.
Chair.
Yes.
So, we get Kula, Honuhula watershed. But we're going to use the South Maui watershed plan. You know, we made that designation.
That is its name, though. That's the name of the plan.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
It's the Southwest Maui Watershed Plan.
Chair Rob, just a quick, I pretty much know the answer, but I just want to ask it. So we're going to come back and discuss all the prioritative levels of these actions, yeah? We're not doing that now, yeah?
Could you turn on the phone microphone?
Are you coming back per your schedule, or are you going to make the, are you going to designate the priority of the actions now?
I don't think we can do the priority of the actions until we've gotten through more of them. We need to, we may get to one which you think is really, really important, so.
Yeah.
Really want to see them all in front of you before you decide which ones are most important.
Well, no, I'm just wondering, because I'm pretty sure other members have concerns about some of the priority levels. After we're done with amending, I don't think it would be a bad idea to, if we can knock out the priority levels too. But that's just me. See how you guys feel.
In some cases, the priorities may actually span topics. You might say, for example, that fire protection is by far the most important thing. We need to prioritize those things. And other things within the watershed management may be important, but not quite as important. I'm just making that up.
Understood. I mean, gosh, it just feels like everything in this is high priority. I know we can't make them all high, but I'm just saying, like, whew.
I agree 100%.
We'll see in a couple days.
I agree. Are we ready for a decision on this? Okay. Are there any objections to the rewritten texts on the screen for 4.02? Finally, we have adopted 4.0.2, or 4.02 rather.
And Vernon had requested to talk about the schedule for 20 minutes, and you're now down to 10.
Okay. So, okay. So it looks like we are not going to make it beyond 4.02 today. Okay, so adjourning the discussion of the policies.
Regarding the schedule, Karen, I don't know who to direct this question to, but the presentation today that ate up a tremendous amount of time, why did we have that?
That was the chair's
Rob,
decision.
I think in the future, I think the agenda should be handled by the planning department. We are months behind schedule. We've had presentations that are out of the ordinary, and I think we should allow the planning department to control the agenda. I make a motion that we allow the planning department to control the agenda.
I disagree. I think the CPAC chair and the CPAC committee should always be in charge of the agendas. These presentations have been very pertinent, so I disagree.
Okay, just excuse me, can I just call something to order? He made a motion. If there's a second,
I
then you
second.
can, okay. Now you can have discussion. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. So I disagree. I think these are all pertinent, right? We need to listen to them. We need to learn about these things. Some of the people sitting on this panel may need to learn some things about our local ways and our Hawaiian cultures. So to disregard that, I think would be disrespectful and unfunctional.
Mr. Chairman,
Wayne?
I'm really upset that a few members want to control this meeting. They want to start ramrodding what we voted onto already and not have any reconsiderations. If the planning department wants to get rid of this committee and ramrod everything through us, so be it. But I expect a little courtesy from this department. I talk about reconsiderations.
So who's next here? Is it Brian?
As Kiyoki said, we're part of this committee. You guys are not telling us to do what we tell you, or we ain't going to finish it. If we don't finish, we don't finish.
Brian?
I haven't been making the schedule except for the ones that I had people scheduled for since November.
Right.
So, Kyogi, I agree that the speakers are critical, at least for myself, because it is a huge education process. Where I guess I'm struggling is that I feel we're very disconnected because the schedules keep changing. So we have a speaker, but we don't actually then talk about the topic, and then I have to go back to remember what it was. So I'm finding it actually very confusing because it seems like we're bouncing around too much, and I'm fearful that we may be missing things and not bringing into account what some testimony might be saying or what speakers are telling us, because we're kind of going from here to here to back. And so for me, that's just my concern. I would like to see a more solid, structured, and Dwayne, to your point, I'm not looking for anybody to ram anything down our throats. I'm looking for more that we can use the information that we're gaining to our benefit so that we can ensure things aren't being rammed down our throats. Not saying you guys are, but make sure we're using all the information that's pertinent to us to make the policies and the actions that are relevant based on the details we have versus trying to recall what somebody told me 3 weeks ago.
I agree completely, and that's what we're doing. So we have been jumping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But this speaker was about this topic, about Mauka to Makai watershed management. It was about permaculture methods to use instead of just concrete. So it was recommended to us because they're doing work for Makena, they're doing work for Molokai, and very, very pertinent to what we're talking about today. And that's the plan for the future too. So we're having Tanya and Ka'onohi are going to come and talk about the cultural preservation and the Vahi Kupuna when we finish up that topic. So definitely keeping the speakers with the topics, doing one topic at a time rather than jumping back and forth. From now on, that's what we're doing. Jennifer?
So yeah, I found today's, even though I had a hard time hearing, I found it in alignment with some of the things that we trying to do. And I had a few questions that I would have wanted to ask the guy, but sorry. I do also feel that we, maybe need to be a little bit more structured so that everybody's on board, but I feel that when we go into these meetings that whatever we can learn, we bring to the table instead of just coming to the table with one idea in mind. I feel like these presentations prepare us for that. And my whole thing is all about traditional practices and the way we do things, but that presentation today gave me a different outlook to kind of see where we can kind of work together on things. So, yeah.
It's unfortunate we had technical issues, but so we couldn't really interact and that they dropped off. The idea really was that they would stay on because I had questions too, very big questions, but I think it was still valuable. Berna?
So I asked for 20 minutes. It's not just about me, but it's all of us expressing what we want to express. For me, it's like I mentioned this how many times. It's challenging, hearing the testimonies, trying to read all of this, hearing from all different hats. I'm not biased, just trying to find what makes sense in the now, present. And then yet we have one time schedule. Now I feel like my back is against the wall, and it's hard to keep my hands down or keep them up because for me, I need more time. Kanaka style, we no more 3 minutes, yeah. We can talk all week on the same policy, just making sure that's going to work. Not going to happen with Robert and Sunshine. That's the umbrella we have to operate, but we have one schedule, and I had a lot to say, but I like what everybody was expressing because it's frustrating. This is our time. We're dedicating our time, and a lot of times, maybe some of you guys don't like hear, the cultural part. It takes a long time, yeah. But when I look back, that's the same thing my dad and others went through. Nobody listened. So our turn. So that's my struggle, is those before us went through this before. And then here we're repeating it over and over again. So do I want to be on CPAC? Probably not anymore, because there's other things I signed up for that's been most benefiting them. But to come here Wednesday nights, this is a lot. For me as on Hawaiian Kanaka to absorb, because you want to represent the testifiers. and then you have like the scientific values, you have the engineering values, you have all. So me, 100 feet is 100 feet for all of it. Keep it simple. But I get what others saying. Maybe we got 25, 50, but see, that all takes time. You know, maybe if we had time, we'd go do a site visit. Because all these little marks over here, that's just marks. We don't know physically, you know, if it's worth preserving or not. But by looking at what we have on the map, hey, yeah, make them all 100 feet, just to be safe. But is it fair to developers and others? That's where I stuck. Is trying to, for me, the culture is first. You know, that's just hands down. But I've said this time and time, I don't like my grass shack back. I still carry my debit card, credit card. I still like go Vegas and have fun and enjoy, but I just had a lot to say, but I think what transpired today, tonight at the end, that's all part of this 20 minutes. It turned out that way. But you know, how much of us really get it? How much of us really understand? How much of us really faking ourselves out and not being true to ourselves? That is hard for me because, like I said, I need time, but time we don't have. So I get on. I know we're doing our best, but when we go planning commission, we can testify. When we go county council, we can testify. We don't know what's going to happen. And then maybe half of the stuff that we implement don't get accepted. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. It's just our time. I don't mind going 1 year, you know, because I feel we were going to get this. But we got to cut our time short. And we're going to have Kanuhi and Tanya make good to hear all that stuff. But that's going to take time too, you know, but it's important, you know. Yeah, mahalo.
I think Mike was first, and then Jennifer.
Jennifer was really first.
Thank you for being. Is that what you said last week? Go for it.
Okay. My understanding as we've been proceeding is that it has been the department that has been setting the agendas all along. So if we're dissatisfied with that process, why wouldn't we want to change it and put it in the hands of our chair? We elected the chair to lead these meetings. And I don't see why we wouldn't want to put that in his hands. This is the CPAC. It's not the planning department. This is us. And if this is our leader, why aren't we willing to let him set the schedule? So I'm speaking against the motion to continue to have the planning department set the agenda. Mahalo.
The only agendas that were set by me were ones that I had scheduled months in advance with presenters. Everything else, and I rescheduled a bunch of presenters and canceled them because of the chair's insistence. And if you're happy with that, if you'd like to continue, that's fine. I will work with the chair to get those agendas out and established on time. But it would be appreciated if the chair would work with us and treat us as allies.
That was my next comment, was I think the chair's been doing, I mean, how many emails have you sent out about how can we be more efficient in our meetings? And you've analyzed, like those spreadsheets, I love them. So you've done a lot to try to speed these meetings up and analyze where are we spending the time. think we're all frustrated because we can't get through anything in a fashion that's consistent. And we're bouncing around. To Vernon's point, we can't absorb anything because we're just all over the place. So I think circling back, what we're doing is not working. And something needs to change. So if it's a matter of counting on the planning department, because this is what you do. We don't plan meetings. This is what you do. And maybe you do. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak out of turn. But that's your job as a planning department to guide us. That's what my understanding was when I took this position. You were going to lead us down a path of success so that we didn't miss anything. We were responsible, held responsible, and we were kept on track because there's how many other people need to approve this plan? And if we want to implement anything, we got to get through it. So if we keep going at this pace, the next 2 phases will never happen and we'll never have a plan that we can actually implement. And that's my frustration. So I do support what Everett's saying, maybe with a friendly amendment of working together, but I don't even know if that's possible because you guys tried that. So maybe that's not the solution. Maybe it is going, I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud at this point, but I do support something needs to be changed.
So in my opinion, if you look at the one I sent out this week, which shows how many policies and actions we got done each day. We got them done. I had some influence in November, December, and then we worked through, one by one, walked through safe, healthy, livable communities for all, and so on. And all those we got a lot done. And then after that, it all fell apart again. I mean, before that, it was falling apart, and then after that, it fell apart. So 2 weeks ago, I checked with Corp Council, and it is the chair who sets the agenda. So I am setting the agenda now, as of 2 weeks ago. And as of now, we're going to do this. We're going to work through systematically. We're going to have the right speaker for the right meeting, and we're going to work through topic by topic until we get done with them. And that gives us many, many advantages. Like, for example, if we're working on something like tonight and we don't finish, we can recess. And that means next time we won't restart from the beginning. We'll continue exactly where we left off. We did that once, and we got a lot done. So that's how we get things done, not by jumping back and forth like we did before. That was absolutely not I've been against that all the time, every single time. But I had influence in November, December, I lost it, and then now I reasserted influence because we need to get back on track. We need to do these things systematically. That's what I've always said.
So my question is, are you going to recess this meeting so the agenda that is out there needs to be pushed back another week?
I'd like to consult with Daniel on that, because as vice chair. I'd like to consult with Daniel, vice chair, on whether we should recess this meeting and continue next week.
Karen, what did you just say? If we recess the meeting, the agenda has to be pushed back?
The schedule provided by the chair the other day will have to all be pushed back by a week. If we recess this meeting, next week's meeting is going to be the continuation of this. Does that push Nohi and Tanya back again? There does have to be some sort of schedule so that people who you ask to come to the meetings and so that departments and people around the community can follow it. It is hard to follow when it changes week by week. And yes, you did finish things systematically in December. That was in the schedule to finish it systematically after. But it did go all kapakai because everything got messed up by just pushing things back and pushing things back. Yes, now if we follow your schedule to the end, it may work. And we could have had this conversation privately if you would bother to call.
So I'm sensing a lot of frustration from a lot of different people. So what I think Karen is saying is that Rob has now come up with a schedule. If we follow that schedule, then you should not recess this meeting because he's made a schedule for the next meeting. So instead of blaming the department that we are pushing things back, that's what will happen. It's a reality. I'm not trying to make blame. That's what will happen because the schedule has been made. If you recess a meeting, you stick with the agenda that you're recessing. So that's why she's stating that will have an impact on your next meeting because we have scheduled people based on the agendas that he has given us. And it's up to you. I mean, you're the body, you're the members. Yes, we've done this for years and years and years. We want to get through the plan in 6 months. That's what we are required to do by law. It's not something that we just make up. We can go and ask for extensions. I don't encourage it, but we can. We have to explain why. And that's going to be tricky, but we'll do it. How long do you keep extending? And to everyone's point, you are the first people to look at this, and I think it is the hardest. Because this is not what you do, right? It's not what you do, it's not what you know. So it is scary. I would agree with Vernon on that. So we ask you to do your best. Your comments will be taken to the Planning Commission, your draft. They're going to look at it. They're going to get testimony. I guarantee you there will be changes made to it. That's just what happens. It's an iterative process. Then it's going to go to council and it's going to get changed again. But you can show up to every single meeting if you wanted to and testify. It doesn't end. It doesn't end here. You know, you can keep providing your input. So we really want to work together to get this thing done. I want all of us to feel good about this when we're done. I don't want people walking out of here being upset. That's not what we're here for. We want to do the best that we can for South Maui. So I really want us to just work together. Let's just stop the blaming. Let's get this thing done. Let's get a good product and be proud of it and get it moving on to the planning commissions. So it can be a win-win.
So there are, besides the scheduling, there are 3 things that can be done here. Either we can have more meetings, meet twice a week. We could work more efficiently during the meetings, or we can extend the time that we work. In other words, go beyond 6 months. There's no other way. Either we're more efficient, we get more work done during the meetings, or we have more meetings. And we can have more meetings either by having more meetings per week, or by having more meetings at the end. So that's really where we're at. I think Daniel is next.
Personally, I know I'm enlisted until the CPAC is done. And I'm optimistic that it will get done because I'm in a room full of not only volunteers, but people who get things done, right? And I support Rob. I support him as the chair and setting the agenda. And I support this agenda that he has set moving forward. And I know that we have a ketchup with mustard day on March 15th, where we can revisit things that we didn't finish. Yes, March 15th, ketchup policy and action discussion. So I do appreciate the fact that our planners want us to keep moving forward. So I think the body wants to do that. I don't know. Taking your temperature. I don't want to say I want to recess the meeting or I want to continue forward, I think at this point it's good to put it out to the body and ask you, do you want to recess this meeting? Or that's my recommendation. Or do you want to move forward with the schedule that we have? So that's how I would like to answer that question.
Regardless, we have to finish these items. We can't just skip them. So one way or another, we need to meet again about the remaining actions. Mike?
Well, as the oldest guy in the room, this is getting past my bedtime, so I think everybody wants to conclude this meeting. But if we have to make that decision, I think it might be smart to just continue on, not have public testimony next week, and do push the schedule back 1 week. We've been making adjustments all along. Everybody makes adjustments consistently. We see it at the county council. We see it at the planning commission. Things adjust when changes have to be made. You have to make them. And I think I've seen extensions. We heard former council member Kelly King say that even the county council has to extend, so they're not going to object to us needing an extension. I think we all feel if it's one or the other, do we want to finish on time or do we want to take more time and get the damn thing right? I think that's what most of us are saying. Yes, we're volunteers, we're putting in our time, but this is certainly for me and even for the youngest guy here, this is probably a once in a lifetime shot for South Maui. So I'd say let's get it right. If it takes more time, takes more effort, I think we should go for it. And if that's the decision tonight, I would say yes. Let's recess it, continue on this topic for 1 more week without having to spend the time for public testimony and get that done. Then pick up that schedule and fill in. I mean, way back when we did transportation, I was the one that said, can't we continue on with transportation? I was voted down. Well, that's the break of the game. Now we haven't touched transportation for what, months? And I made kind of a joke out of it. This old guy's gonna forget. I think by now many of us have forgotten exactly where we were on transportation because it was so long ago. Anyhow, I'm saying let's conclude this. I better stop talking. Follow.
Brian?
So I'm open to recessing, but I guess my request, and this is kind of where I was going with structure, is I think people are let to talk way too long. We're not holding people accountable to the time limits. We're letting people not or make comments versus qualifying questions. So I would strongly request that we put more structure in the meeting itself that will make us more productive, we'll get through more. Because I just think we literally spend 3/4 of our time not actually talking about anything. And then at the very end, we're trying to cram everything in. And I feel like we're rushing that component, but we're letting everything else just be open, kind of open space or timelines. And not that I want to shut things down, but I think we're not getting the opportunity to actually discuss things, to actually have open discussion, because we only get through 1 or 2 topics.
Kavika?
3 comments. So as far as the extension part, I think the other thing that you guys should consider, because we're all here Wednesday anyway, is maybe potentially extending time on Wednesday, maybe starting a little bit earlier, maybe going a little bit later. That's one consideration, in addition to all the other extension options that you went over. Thing number 2, there was a motion on the floor by Everett, second by Jennifer, about that need to get voted on. And then comment number 3, we do have Corporation Council scheduled to come next week to talk about a specific agenda item that, if you recess, would also have to be rescheduled and factored into the schedule that you presented to us. So 3 comments for this body's consideration.
I didn't quite get the third one. Can you say it again?
Corporation Counsel is scheduled to come next week in order to talk to everyone about ethics concerns. We can post that on the agenda that is currently written, but if you recess the meeting, it cannot be added to the agenda because it's just a recessed meeting.
Any further discussion of the motion? Wayne?
What is the motion?
Restate the motion.
To allow the planning department to set the schedule for the meetings.
Okay, since I know there's disagreement, I'm not going to ask if there are any objections. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those against, please raise your hand. And those abstaining, please raise your hand. So you need to do one of the three. Either yes, no, or abstain. No? Okay. Okay, I find the motion has failed. Okay, so, but we still haven't resolved the question of if we recess or not. And
Sure. Okay, I'll make a motion that we recess this meeting.
is there a second? So recess means we pick up where we left off next meeting. That's right. Yeah, unless someone seconds it.
So can I second it so we can have discussion?
Yeah, seconded by Tova.
What do you think of a friendly amendment where we recess this time, but then we agree to stick with the schedule and have a go at sticking with the schedule that Rob made after that? Because I feel like things are breaking down here. We all are wanting the same thing. We're having a hard time accommodating everyone's needs, and this shouldn't be something that feels yucky, and it's starting to feel yucky. So would recessing once and then otherwise sticking address some of the concerns that we have about not having a path plotted forward?
With Corp Counsel, when will we get him back? That's the whole point of next week's meeting, right? Because you've scheduled him. My friendly amendment would be after next week, maybe we want to recess, but only because we have Corp Counsel scheduled.
I forgot about that. I didn't know how limited that was. If it's limited, then I agree.
I have no idea when he'll be available. He was not available this week, and so then I asked his next availability.
Well, on that, on the friendly amendment, I would go along with it if we don't make that an ironclad rule that we can never recess another meeting. I think that's a little bit too strong, but that was my intent. That's what I originally suggested. Can we recess and then go to that schedule moving forward? And as far as Corp Counsel, I mean, when he was here, I think for the second time, how many meetings he hasn't been here, he just kind of seemed to make that very light. Well, yep, I'm only here a second time. I've been very busy with other stuff. And I understand that. And when he couldn't be here, there's a lot of deputies. So we saw that when he couldn't be here and there was an important issue and Michael Hopper came. So I don't think that we should, I don't want to schedule things by a schedule of one person in that department. I think they should be making adjustments. That's how I look at that. So if we can't have him next week because we're recessing it, I would still say recess it. But I would be open to what Tova was saying is a friendly amendment if we word it carefully, that we're not saying never again, this is only a one-time action. Thank you.
Leroy?
My question would be though for the Corp Council person coming, that's in regards to the letter that we got from Mr. Frampton, which I had emailed Karen about. So my main concern is that if we don't talk to Corp Council about it, if proceeding without doing so, would that jeopardize anything that's been voted on? But I'm assuming that because our chair can't vote and his name was mentioned or possibly in it by chairmanship, that his vote doesn't count anyway. But I think the consideration was for him to, is to recuse himself maybe on certain matters. But so getting to my question would be, it sounds like it's very imperative that he comes so we can address this, because will it jeopardize anything if we move forward? So that's my main thing, is we got to get it out of the way so we can proceed. And if not, then I would support Mike's going into recess. But if you folks advise that we better talk to him first before we proceed, I'd rather do that. Everybody got that letter, right? No. He handed it, Mr. Frampton handed that letter out to everybody. And so, like 2 meetings ago, I think, yeah, that he handed that letter out, asking that our chair, and I may not be saying it correctly, but to recuse himself because of your affiliation with a particular group. So I'll let you maybe talk about that or no? I have the letter, a copy of it. So.
All I was going to say is, I'm not an attorney. I can't tell you whether you guys are going to, anything will be in jeopardy or not. I don't know. But he has been scheduled for a reason to address something that is serious. So I will leave it up to this body to decide how you want to handle that.
I was actually the one who requested it for next week. So it was not him. It was not. So it's not a. I requested just because I'd like to get it resolved once and for all, because I don't think there is an issue. But I can wait. I don't need it to happen next week.
My concern is you can wait, but can we all wait? That's why I don't want it to jeopardize us moving forward. Why we go 2 forward and then 3 back? So that's what I'm asking. Yeah, should we just get it over with?
I will comment on something.
Better.
Yeah, so on that, I actually approached Corp Council because Haleakala Ranch is going to come in and testify. Hawaii Materials Recycling leases land from them, and I wanted to cover my basis to make sure there wasn't anything. Anyway, so they said, yes, write a letter to the Board of Ethics, explain your situation. And the Board of Ethics came back. I don't have the final letter, but they asked me to recuse myself of all discussion and voting with anything to do with the ranch, as we as a company can benefit from whatever they decide to do. So that has now opened up. I think that's what happened. So anyway, that's the backstory to that. So I think it's important that we have the Corp Council here and just get this off the table. And we can continue with everything going forward as the schedule. And then, like you said, if we need to recess, we'll recess at that point.
May I suggest you call for the question, Chair, on whether to recess the meeting?
Say it again?
May I suggest that you call for the question and take a vote on whether or not to recess the meeting?
Yes. Okay. So any further discussion on Mike's motion? Okay. All in favor of the motion to recess the meeting, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. And those opposed?
6, 7.
And those abstaining?
2.
So let's see, sorry, what was the vote?
3-7-2. So 9 to 3. Well, 2 people abstain, which counts as a yes vote. So it's 9. Sorry. As a yes. Can you do that again, please? Sorry. All those in favor of recessing the meeting, please raise your hand.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
First, what exactly is the definition of a recessed meeting?
It means that we continue with the agenda exactly where we left off, so we don't restart with testimony or add any items. It'll be exactly the way it was today. Those in favor, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3.
And those opposed?
3 ayes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And those abstaining? Okay, none this time. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's too quick there. 2 abstaining. Okay. So I find the motion has passed. I'm sorry, it's failed. It's failed, and so we are not recessing. Daniel?
It's almost 9 o'clock, and my family's not worried about me. But I like the suggestion maybe to help us catch up a little bit and make up some ground. Extending the meeting by a half hour and having us stay till 9. Because we seem to be very productive at the end of the meeting. We seem to be, we are building momentum and then we stop. But if we kept going for another half hour, maybe we could make up some ground. That's my suggestion.
Are we ready for discussion about that now? Is that a motion?
Yes, I make that a motion that we extend our meetings till 9 o'clock, all the way through summer school. For as long as it's necessary, If we feel like we've caught up, then, go back to the schedule as it is now.
I second the motion to extend the meetings for half an hour.
Friendly amendment. 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock. Do I hear 12?
Could people do 5:15 to 8:45? It starts to get kind of late. I don't know if that works for people to start at a tiny bit, but split the difference.
We would actually prefer earlier than later, so.
Five works for me, but are there people who would have time getting here from work if we started at 5? Is everybody okay with 5 o'clock? Okay. So you want to revise your proposal, your motion?
That was a friendly amendment from somebody. Oh, from Tova, yes, why?
We can get friendly again.
It's 5 o'clock, yeah. Starting at 5 to 8:30. That works for everybody.
And who seconded it? Was Everett? Okay.
So if we can't make it at 5, we just gotta show up when we show up.
That was the question, whether everyone can
Because
make
like
it.
last week, I mean, everybody can, but I just think for me, last week I got relocated to the North Shore, and I had to get permission from my captain to take a 1-hour CTO just so I could make the meeting last week, because I wanted to make sure I was here on time at 5:30. So that's just my situation. So if I can show up later, you guys can start at 5. You'll still have quorum, and if I'm in Kihei, it's not as bad, and the roundabout is open, so it used to take me half an hour from Kamole to here before, but now it's not too bad. Until they start building the thing, and then we gotta get stuck in traffic again.
Brian?
So I'm all good with doing the half an hour, and I can go whatever end it needs to be, but I'd like to go back to just reinforcing that I think we have to have more control in the meeting, because adding a half an hour, but having stuff just go on and on and on, it isn't going to really help us. So I think we can do the half an hour, but I really think we need to get a lot more control on how long people are talking on topics.
No problem.
No, but I mean that very seriously, because we could add an hour, and if everybody just keeps talking, it's not going to change.
Garrett?
Just an observation.
just an observation, do we need to have clarifying questions and follow-up responses? Just a personal observation, seems like often it's more just commentary versus anything that's really contributing to this body's discussion. Because when we look at 3 minutes plus another minute plus another minute back and forth, I mean that's almost doubling the time. Just throwing it out there, I just don't know the feedback this body has been getting from that dialogue has been super contributing. I don't know.
Cody?
Maybe we can have them like sign up, or if they want to sign up, give the info, and if you want to reach out to them, maybe we can do that and then bypass the questions. I don't know. What you think?
Tova was saying during the break that she gets people's numbers if she wants to call them rather than doing the discussion when it really is only supposed to be clarifying questions. Vernon?
Yeah, Garrett, so yeah, I'm guilty for being, so me, you hear me, I comment all the time when I should be asking clarifying questions. That's still my challenge because those comments do line up to what some of the testifiers are sharing, that it's important. So yeah, the comments will stretch this meeting further too. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I just want to say about I think it'd be very unfortunate if we set our times so that one member often can't make it and everyone else can. That would be bad, even if so. I mean, obviously everyone's going to have a day when they come late sometime, but it shouldn't be systematically so if there's one person who's affected. Jennifer?
I agree. If we need to do it 5:30 to 9, I think, because originally we all signed up for 5:30, right? And that worked, Kyoki, right? Yeah. So, sorry guys. Okay, and then also to your point, I think that's great. Yes, we do like hearing the testifiers, and perhaps it's a discussion we have without engaging the testifier. So maybe as a team we can, or as a body we can say, okay, we're going to discuss it on our own, and then follow up with questions after the meeting, like Cody was suggesting. But when we engage the testifier, it just prolongs things. Maybe that's the compromise.
Brian, and then Cody.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands. I think that the commentary is actually really helpful. So I don't want to discount that, saying that like, I don't want to hear it. I do, but I think to Jennifer's point, can we do it in a different manner so that we're learning and that we're sharing and you're helping reinforce that? But I do think engaging some of the testifiers, they then go on their additional journey of what they want to explain. And I think that kind of extends it. But I do think that your comments to help reinforce or tie things together is very helpful because it gives me a better understanding of what they're saying and validation to it. So I think if we can figure out a way to balance that, I think it would help us move forward.
Cody?
Maybe we can just be better as a board and as members to really just pertain it to clarifying questions and not comments or whatever.
If you all agree to that, I will hold you to it. Everyone agree?
Yeah. Because sometimes, thinking back to some of the comments I made in the past, they're pretty important. So.
Tova?
Daniel was a pretty good sheriff last week, and I wonder if it wouldn't hurt to have a deputy for that explicit purpose, because it's hard to run a meeting, keep track of everything, look for people talking, and be the gatekeeper. Does it make sense to have Daniel as a deputy, politely telling people that might not be a clarifying question? Can we move on? Sorry to put you in the hot spot there.
Absolutely. You are hereby deputized. I'll get you your star next week.
I'll leave it up to the chair how he wants to have me operate as vice chair.
Okay, so we have a proposal to extend our meetings from 5:30 to 9. And I think that's where we stand, right?
No, it was from, yes, it was from 5 to 8:30. Now I'll just amend it from 5:30 to 10:30. 5:30, what time? 5:30 to 9, right? Okay, 5:30 to 9.
Okay, any further discussion? Any objections to extending to 5:30 to 9? I mean, obviously, if we finish early, we finish early. We don't need to stay here. Okay, fine. We will, starting next week, aim for 5:30 to 9. I guess that means the meeting's over. Time to shake our booties.
I couldn't help it.
Okay. Adjourning the meeting, or closing the meeting at 9:10 p.m.